Okay, we were just high school buddies, and we were all musicians that had played with local Western bands around the area here. There was about 2 or 3 Western bands and of course in those days it was called Western music, not country music. This goes way back. And we just decided that for a PTA show, a talent show, that we were going to get together and do a rock and roll song, which no one in the area was playing rock and roll. And we learned one song. That one song was Jerry Lee Lewis's Great Balls of Fire. And we really didn't have a name for the group. So someone says, well, I guess it was my uncle that told my dad, said, one of the guys called themselves the Fireballs. And I thought that was a great name, so it stuck.
And what was the extent of your musical involvement before the Fireballs? Were there any other bands?
Yes, as a matter of fact, myself and Stan Lark, who's our bass player, and Eric Budd, who was the original drummer, all 3 of us played with a group called Perry Turner and the Drifters. We played with, the Night Riders and the Rabbit Ear Troubadours out of Clayton, New Mexico. And as a matter of fact, I think maybe Stan might have played with the Frisco Canyon Ramblers. So,
for yourself
all Western music.
All Western music. For yourself as a guitar player, who were the first players that really made you sit up and take notice?
Well, I would say that my first interest came from, I'm trying to think the name of the group, Guitar Boogie Smith, that did the Guitar Boogie Shuffle. And then there was another group that re-recorded it, but I think the first time I ever heard that recording was that really attracted me to the guitar. And then, of course, I heard Les Paul and Chet Atkins. Both of those guys were real favorites of mine.
What was the music scene like in New Mexico in those very early days? Were there a lot of bands like yourselves going around?
In the early 50s?
Yeah, in those early days, yeah.
Well, no, there was no rock and roll bands. It was all Western music. Our local radio station would not play any rock and roll. They thought it was really bad music and just wouldn't participate with any kind of rock and roll records at all. As a matter of fact, once the Fireballs recorded and we brought our first recording back to Raton, probably was one of the very few times that they would even spin a rock and roll record.
Wow.
Yeah.
Tell us about your first time auditioning for Norman Petty. Are your memories still vivid of that occasion?
Oh, absolutely. We went down and auditioned for him on a Sunday afternoon. And this is the funny thing about it was we were scheduled to audition for him at 2 o'clock. And, of course, we were there at 1 o'clock. We got set up and got our instruments tuned, and we were rehearsing what we're going to play for Mr. Petty when he comes in at 2 o'clock. And there was already some people at the studio there. There was a couple of guys in the control room. They were young guys. They were doing something with the tape machines, and we were talking with the secretary, Norma Jean Berry. And so 2 o'clock came, and it went, and we kept rehearsing and going over songs. Stuff. It was about 3 o'clock. It's about an hour after the scheduled time for our appointment, and I asked Norma Jean, I said, where's Norm Petty? I thought he was supposed to be here at 2. And she looked at me and then looked through the double pane windows into the control room and says, "Well, that's Mr. Petty in there." And we were all floored because he was a young guy, very well dressed, very, he was a very groomed person, nice looking. He wasn't the typical record executive like we once would think of, with a sort of a fat guy who's smoking a cigar or something. That wasn't Mr. Petty at all. He was a very clean-cut, well-dressed, well-mannered person. And then she called him in, and of course he laughed because he had been listening to us. And that's what he wanted to do. He wanted to listen to us without us realizing it was really him.
How much of your success would you attribute to your association with him?
Pardon?
How much of your success would you attribute to being associated with him?
Just a whole bunch. Maybe 50%, maybe more, because without Norman Petty, who knows? We might have, the Fireballs might not have ever happened. That's hard to say. But we were very blessed and very fortunate to be affiliated with Norman Petty because he was really he had a keen mind and a keen ear to locate your uniqueness in your music, sort of like Holly was. Holly was very unique, and Norman used to use that term a lot. He'd say, he'd listen to new artists and he'd say, "Well, I don't know, I don't think they're unique enough," and but I guess he thought Holly was unique and Roy Orbison was unique and the Fireballs were unique, and so he worked with us. We were glad about that.
He didn't at any time make you feel like you're one of his lesser projects, even because he was working with Holly at the same time?
If you say that question again,
well, was he still?
I don't know that I really understand.
Sure. Was he still generous in the time and the attention that he paid to your band? Considering he was working with Buddy Holly, he never made you feel like you were just one of his lesser projects.
Oh no! He never did make you feel. He always made you feel like what your contribution was important, regardless if he was working with Holly and the Crickets. And as a matter of fact, the time that we showed up was right at the time that Buddy and the Crickets were having some differences, and Buddy was fixing to go to New York. So that the fact that Holly and the Crickets being around a lot while we were there at the beginning didn't happen because Buddy was already thinking about going and living and staying in New York.
Yeah. Do you remember the first time you heard yourselves on radio?
As a matter of fact, yes. Which was in Clovis. And no, I tell you what, it wasn't in Clovis. It was here in Raton because Norman mailed us the records when they came into the studio. Then he mailed us copies of the 45 of Cap Records Fireball, and we took it down to the radio station here in town. And I think probably just the fact that it was our record, they kind of felt like they were forced to have to play it. And we heard it for the first time on the radio here in Raton. And of course, down in Clovis, they were playing it all the time, during those days. Almost everybody was playing Norman Petty music down there. Anything that had been recorded at Norman Petty Studios was being played in Clovis.
Now, you could certainly be considered forerunners to a sound that became known as surf music in the early 60s. How did it feel seeing other bands have greater success playing a format that you probably helped create?
Well, and we didn't know, we had no idea that we were helping to create that kind of a format. Simply because we were unfamiliar with surf music and the term surf. I didn't even know what the surf was. And what was funny was when we went to Dick Clark American Bandstand in Philadelphia in 1960, in January of 60, he introduced us as the Fireballs, a surf band from New Mexico. And, of course, we all kind of wondered after we were finished with our performance. We said, how come he said that? You know, what did he mean by that? We really were unaware that we were contributing to the surf dimension. We just didn't know.
Did you become a fan of some of those bands that followed with that surf sound?
Well, I certainly did appreciate the Ventures. They were very classy, and they were very professional, very good. Dick Dale, excellent guitarist. And then some of the other ones, the Safaris, and there was just several groups. Johnny and the Hurricanes, of course, they weren't necessarily surf, but they were an instrumental group. But there was a lot of instrumental groups that we liked. Some of them were surf, and some of them were just regular instrumental groups, like the Champs.
Ah, yes.
Man, that was one of our favorites right there.
How did Jimmy Gilmer make his way into the group?
In 1960, when we started having releases and the disc jockeys were playing our instrumental sides, we had a vocal side and we had an instrumental side on our records. For some odd reason, the disc jockeys started playing the instrumental sides over and above the vocal sides, and so we became known as an instrumental band after about the second release. And I think that our lead singer, Chuck Tharp, he felt like he was not needed in the group, which was wrong thinking. But nevertheless, he probably felt like, that nothing was going to happen for him. So he decided he would just quit. Well, of course, we weren't a total instrumental band. We needed a singer, and because Chuck sang a lot of songs with us on our live performances. And we, Chuck and I had written some things together vocally. So anyhow, when Chuck quit, well, we were needing to go on tour in about 30 days, and we didn't have a vocalist. So Norman suggested that we get a hold of Jimmy Gilmer out of Amarillo, Texas, who had been over to Norman Petty's studio to record. And he said, why don't we contact Jimmy and see if Jimmy would like to fill in the spot that we needed, that Chuck left open. So we did, and he came over, and we talked to him for a little while. We went in the studio and rehearsed some vocals, and we rehearsed a little bit, and we could see that he liked what we did, and we liked what he did, and that it would work. And so we made a deal that he would join the group, and we worked real hard for the next 30 days, and then we went on tour.
Were you a bit...
That was in 1960.
Were you a bit taken back with Jimmy getting billing over top of the band name when he began working with you?
Well, the reason that was done was, like Norman, that was Norman's marketing idea. When Holly and the Crickets came over from Lubbock, they came over to record just as the Crickets. And Norman was the one that started separating Buddy Holly and the Crickets, and then having Buddy Holly records and then having Crickets records. Uh-huh. He's trying to sell twice as many records. And so he was using the same thing with the Fireballs. It would have been nice if he would have let us know that's what he was going to do. But just all of a sudden, as a matter of fact, I think Sugar Shack was, when the record Sugar Shack came out, it said Jimmy Gilmer and the Fireballs, and he hadn't even discussed that with us. He just had it pressed up that way. So, and of course, once the record hit, people knew the record as Jimmy Gilmer and the Fireballs. Well, we had to run with it, naturally. And he was trying to establish Jimmy as a single artist, which he actually eventually did, separate from the Fireballs. So that's the story behind that, which was fine,
It was a real
it didn't work. I guess I should say that it didn't work as well for Jimmy Gilmer and the Fireballs as it did for Buddy Holly and the Crickets.
It was a change of direction, I guess, for the band recording a track like Sugar Shack after the music that you had been making. Did you feel like you were taking a bit of a risk there, steering away from what you'd been known for?
Well, no, because all the while we had been recording vocals, but just nothing that we had as a vocal. The disc jockeys didn't play; they just weren't playing that. They kept playing the instrumental sides. So it wasn't that it was a surprise. It was the fact that, well, finally, when we had a vocal, it was the number one of the U.S. And of course we were tickled about that.
So after you recorded it, you could see the hit potential in the song?
Well, we didn't know that it was going to be that strong, because we recorded it with several other vocals at the time, And as a matter of fact, Norman was the one that really had faith in Sugar Shack because of that little part that he had added. He thought it was a real hook and a real something that was going to be real special, and he was right. As a matter of fact, he had more faith in it than the record company president of Dot Records. He really didn't want to release the record because he thought it was too different to be a hit. But in fact, it was so different, it was a huge hit.
Sure was. You got to work on some Buddy Holly tapes that surfaced after his death. Tell us about those and how that all came together.
Well, Norman was authorized by the record company and by I guess the Holly family that to go ahead and do that project, get those apartment tapes, so to speak, and we had asked Norman, when he asked us to be a part of the project, my question to Norman was, well, why don't you get the Crickets to do this? Because that would seem like it's the most natural thing. And he said, well, he told us, he said that the Crickets were unavailable, and he said, I want the Fireballs to do it. Well, we didn't know exactly what he meant by that, but nevertheless, we said, well, we weren't going to question it any further. If he wanted us to do it, well, we'll just go ahead with the project. So we started doing a little bit at a time, doing some of the Holly things, some of our own stuff, other artists that were coming in. We were working all the time on all kinds of different sessions, and Norman just kept the Holly things, every so often we'd do a couple of Holly things until the whole project was done, which is turned out to be a real important thing in our history, and we never thought that it was going to matter that much, And here's the thing about our dub ends with the Holly stuff. Some people are real upset that we did that, and then some people are very complimentary that we did. And I mean, we understand both viewpoints, if I had to say which way do we, well, I would say that we're glad that we did it.
Absolutely.
Although I do appreciate the purists who wish that we hadn't have, you know.
Moving forward a few years now, who came up with the arrangement for Bottle of Wine, considering it was a song of folk music origins?
No, Jimmy, when he went to Nashville after he was with the Fireballs, of course, for about 10, 11 years, and then he went into management and working with publishing and things like that, and got off of the road. He recorded a version of Bottle of Wine and a version of Sugar Shack, but neither one of those have been real favorites in the reissues at all. Most of the reissue companies want our original hits of Sugar Shack and Bottle of Wine, but we haven't done any re-recordings of Bottle of Wine for, you know, since the original. The only one that's done a re-record was Jimmy when he left the group and did that kind of on his own.
Right, but the arrangement
was for. Pardon?
The arrangement that was a hit for the Fireballs. Who came up with that?
It was just a group effort. We just took a Tom Paxton song that was a folk song and tried to rock it up, and you know, all the group members contributed their ideas, and we just came up with something that was a little bit more in your face rather than a folk song, and that's what we wound up with.
Now, just moving forward a few years for yourself personally, I believe you took a bit of a break from the music scene in the 80s, working in the insurance industry.
Yeah, I did. I thought that, you know, things were. I was so really actually disconnected with the music business at that point, because music has just taken on a whole different direction. Our early stuff wasn't being played, and I don't know, it was just, I thought I would try something different, and I did, and it didn't work. But I learned a lot of good stuff, though. I learned some money management, and I learned about some insurance, and I actually wound up using the knowledge myself more so than I did being able to be a salesman about it.
Just the same, though, do you think, looking back now, that was a break that you probably needed to have in order to be back making music today?
I think probably it didn't hurt.
Yeah.
Probably didn't hurt.
So what's the makeup of the Fireballs? What's the makeup of the Fireballs today? Who are the guys in the band these days?
Okay, Stan Lark is still our bass player. He's the original bass player. And as far as the Fireballs go in New Mexico, myself and Stan Lark. Then we have a guitar player that also doubles on keyboard, and occasionally saxophone, and he sings. His name is Ron Cardenas. And our drummer at the particular time is Chris Segura, a little Hispanic fella that just beats those drums just violently and sings exceptionally well. And he's been a real asset. He's been with us about a year and a half now. And we have started last year. We did we did 3 jobs together with Jimmy Gilmer.
Oh, great.
Yeah. So, and as a matter of fact, this year in April, we're doing a job in Long Island, New York with Jimmy Gilmer.
Fantastic. And the make.
So we're booked. Pardon?
No, go ahead.
Hello?
Yeah, you're right. Go continue on.
Okay. This particular job is booked as Jimmy Gilmer and the Fireballs.
Fantastic. And what would be the makeup of your live set these days? Is it a good mix of old and new material?
Actually, we're doing mainly all the old stuff because that's what people want to hear. They want to hear Sugar Shack, Bottle of Wine, Daisy Pedal Pickin', Ain't Gonna Tell Anybody, Long Green, just, those ones that we had out that were chart records, and some of the instrumentals we still do. Torquay and Bulldog and Quite a Party, and occasionally you do some of the newer stuff like Harley Guitar, which is a newer guitar instrumental that I've written that I probably need to email to you so you can maybe review that for your radio show.
Yeah, please do. Yeah, that'd be great. And just to finish up, George, what's coming up for you in the new year? What are the plans for the band this year?
Well, it looks like we're going to try to work even more dates with Jimmy Gilmer. And the Fireballs had a very good year this last year. And it looks like for 2008, we're going to be just as busy again, hopefully, it looks like, and maybe even busier than last year. So we're doing lots of things. We've got one particular place that we do a lot of repeat work at, and that's in Ruidoso, New Mexico, which is a summer and winter ski resort and a summer resort. And there's a place there called Mountain Annie's Dinner Theater. And we perform there about once a month throughout the year.
Fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so another.
We'd like to come to Australia, if we can get an agent to bring us down there.
That would be fantastic. Never been before?
Think that we'd do any good down there?
Oh, I think there'd be certainly a market for you down here, no problem at all. You haven't been here before?
We have never been to Australia.
Oh, well.
And we understand that Bottle of Wine was what? Top 10 record down there?
Absolutely, yes, certainly was.
Yeah, we have never been to Australia. Why don't you see if you can pull some strings and get us down there?
We'll have to get working on that, I think. Yep, for sure. Hey, George, thanks so much for your time. It's been a treat to catch up with you. I'm glad we finally made it work.
John, thank you.
Thanks for all the fantastic music over the years, and let's make 2008 the year of the Fireballs in Australia. That'd be terrific.
That'd be great, and I hope it's a special year for you too. And because of disc jockeys like you who don't forget guys like us, that's what keeps us going. Thank you very much.
We'll never forget you. Don't worry about that.
All right, John.
Thanks so much, George. All the best.
Thank you, Case.
Okay.
God bless. Bye.
Bye-bye.